I never expected my quiet afternoon by the pool to turn into a chaotic showdown with an entitled stranger. Karen, as she confidently called herself, trespass on my pool while I'm gone, claims it's HOA property. Here's how it all went down. I've always been a low-key kind of guy. Not much for drama or big crowds. That's probably why my backyard is my go-to spot, especially the pool. I could spend hours there, just soaking in the calm. The blue of the water, the birds doing their thing in the background. It's like my personal escape from everything else. So, one day after finishing up some work from home, I locked up and decided to head out to the store. Just needed to grab some snacks and maybe a new book to enjoy poolside later. But when I came back, my whole vibe was thrown off. First, I heard the splashing, then some really loud talking, and I thought, what now? Walking to the back, there was this lady, probably in her 50s, acting like she was at some five-star resort, drink in one hand, fancy sunglasses on, and just floating around in my pool. It was wild. For a guy who just wanted a quiet afternoon, this was definitely not on the agenda. "Hey, what do you think you're doing in my pool?" I shouted, flabbergasted by the audacity of this stranger. She looked up, not a hint of embarrassment on her face, and declared, "This pool is HOA property." I blinked, utterly dumbfounded. "What? No, it's not. This is my private property," she scoffed, rolling her eyes. "You must be new here. I've been living in this neighborhood for years, and this pool has always been for everyone." "That's ridiculous. I bought this house, and the pool came with it. No one mentioned anything about it being shared property," she smirked. "Well, maybe you should have read the fine print. The HOA has certain rules." I was livid. "I'm no HOA member, and I certainly didn't sign up for strangers using my pool." She sighed dramatically. "You young folks always think you know everything, but I've been here longer, and I know the rules." Realizing that reasoning with her was futile, I decided to take a different approach. "All right, Karen, let's say you're right. How about showing me some proof that this pool is HOA property?" She hesitated for a moment, clearly not expecting that. "Proof? Why would I carry proof around? Just ask anyone in the neighborhood." Smiling, I replied, "I did, and they all said this is my private property. So unless you have any evidence to back up your claim, I suggest you leave." She smirked. "Why don't we settle this? Call the community's security. They'll vouch for me." Seeing no other option, I did just that. The community security guards were familiar faces, having patrolled our neighborhood for years. Within a short time, 2 of them arrived, looking somewhat puzzled. "Is there a problem here?" one of them inquired. Karen immediately took charge. "Tell this gentleman that this pool is HOA property." The security guards exchanged glances. The taller one then said, "Ma'am, we've been overseeing this community for quite some time, and this pool has always been private. You're trespassing." Karen's face turned a shade of crimson. "This is ridiculous! I've brought my kids here before!" The other guard calmly responded, "You must be mistaken. We'd advise you to leave to avoid further complications." Defeated and clearly embarrassed, Karen hastily collected her belongings, still mumbling about the crazy rules of the community. The guards gave me an empathetic nod, assuring me they'd keep an eye out for any such incidents in the future. The rest of my day was spent in the tranquil embrace of my pool. While the encounter with Karen was unsettling, it was also a stark reminder of the importance of standing one's ground. Some battles, it seemed, were worth the splash. Wow, what a wild encounter. Karen must have thought she owned the whole neighborhood. Good on the OP for standing their ground and getting the security guards involved. Some people just don't understand boundaries. As a widower, I thought I had found love again, but one insensitive remark shattered everything. The dinner that was supposed to celebrate our engagement turned into a tense and uncomfortable ordeal. My kids were disgusted, and now I'm faced with a difficult decision. Here's how it all went down. For some background information, I, 43-year-old male, have 2 children with my late wife, Kayla. Sam, 21-year-old male, and Liz, 16-year-old female, are not their real names. Kayla passed away when our kids were 15 and 10. I won't provide specific details about how she passed, but she was struck by a drunk driver while on her way home from work. Her passing had a profound impact on our family. I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't date anyone for at least a couple of years for the sake of my kids. 3 years after my wife's passing, I met my now fiancée, whom we'll call Amanda. Our relationship progressed slowly, and I didn't introduce her to my kids until we had been dating for about a year. Currently, we have been together for 3 years and are engaged. Amanda has always had a good relationship with my kids. While they aren't extremely close to her, they have been friendly and welcoming. Amanda has never overstepped any boundaries with my kids, such as trying to replace their mother. At the beginning of our relationship, Amanda was a bit insecure about the fact that I was a widower. During the first few months of dating, she would frequently ask questions like, if Kayla had never passed, would I still be with her right now? I always gave brief answers and told her that I didn't like dwelling on what ifs. I emphasized that she was the person I was currently dating, and that was what mattered. Eventually, she stopped making these comments and I stopped worrying about it. Now to the issue. My parents were hosting a family dinner to celebrate my fiancé and I's engagement. It was my mom and dad, my late wife's sister and her husband Sam and Liz, and me and Amanda. Dinner was going well, we were all making small talk with each other, and talked about wedding plans. About halfway into dinner, my mom made a comment about how she was so happy I was able to find the spark I had with Kayla in someone else. I don't think anybody really paid much attention to the comment, but then Amanda laughed and said, "I'm happy she died, otherwise I would have never gotten him to myself." The tone of the dinner immediately shifted and everyone got extremely tense, especially my kids. Amanda noticed the shift and started awkwardly laughing like she was trying to play her comment off as a joke. I was honestly just frozen, as that was the first time she had made a comment like that. My kids looked disgusted and Liz got up and walked out to the car. Sam waited a bit longer like he wanted me to say something, but I was still in shock about what Amanda had said. To make a long story short, the dinner was ruined. I said my goodbyes to everyone, grabbed my fiancé, and we all drove home. Since then, my daughter hasn't spoken to me or Amanda for 3 days. Feeling tired of the situation, I pulled my son aside and asked for his advice. He expressed that he doesn't care who another grown man marries, but he doesn't want a woman who speaks disrespectfully about our mother around his sister. Sam's comment resonated with me, and now I'm contemplating calling off the engagement. While my fiancé has never made comments like this before, I'm concerned that if I let it slide this time, it may become a recurring issue that affects my daughter. I'm seeking advice from others and want to do right by my kids. Would I be a jerk to call off the engagement because of the comment she made? Before I continue, I also want to clarify some things. Did my fiancé apologize to anyone at the dinner party? No, she didn't. I honestly don't think she even realized or acknowledged that her comment was inappropriate. Does my fiancé have social anxiety? Not to my knowledge. In all the time I've known her, she has never shown any signs of social anxiety and doesn't have a history of it. How old was my late wife? She was 37 when she passed away and we were the same age. Amanda is currently 41. Many people have asked for clarification on the timeline of my wife's passing and when I met my fiancé. At this point, it has been about 6 years since Kayla's passing, and I met Amanda approximately 3 years after that. I didn't mention their ages before because I didn't think it was important, given that we are close in age, but I understand why many of you would want to know. So, moving forward to my story, I spoke to my kids. Last night at around 5:30, my fiancé left for work. She usually works nights for most of the week. This allowed me to call my son and ask him to come over so that I could talk to him and his sister. He attends our local college and lives in an apartment near his school. When he started college, he wanted to move out, but also wanted to stay close to us, so he found an apartment a few blocks away from the college. He came over, and I called both him and his sister into the living room to have a conversation. Once they were both seated, I directly told them that I didn't think the wedding was happening anymore, and that the comment my fiancé made was unacceptable. Following the advice from the comments, I apologized to them. I expressed my regret for not speaking up sooner and allowing tensions to escalate in our home. I also told my daughter that I understood why she hadn't spoken to me and apologized for giving her the impression that I was even remotely okay with what was said. I felt remorseful after returning from dinner that night, so I was determined to make things right with my kids during our conversation. My daughter expressed disgust at Amanda's comment and felt even more upset when I didn't defend her mother. She also shared that over the past 2 years, she felt like Amanda had been gradually trying to distance her and Sam from me. Liz provided an example of this when my son moved out. He decided to move out before starting his sophomore year of college, and Amanda seemed to encourage him the most. To clarify, I wasn't against Sam moving out, but I made it clear that he was welcome to live at home during his college years, and even afterward, until he found his own path. I asked Sam if he felt pushed out by Amanda, and if that's why he moved out. He said he didn't feel pushed out until he mentioned his desire to move, after which my fiancé started pushing him to leave. Liz interjected and mentioned that whenever she talks about college, Amanda encourages her to go out of state. However, Liz wants to attend the same college as Sam and has been vocal about it. Liz feels like Amanda is waiting for her to graduate high school and go to college so she can also move out. Many comments were correct in pointing out that Amanda's subtle remarks eventually led to her wanting to push my kids away from me. Liz expressed concern that by the time I noticed Amanda's behavior, a significant divide would have already formed between me and my children. I apologized to my kids for not noticing sooner, and acknowledged that they had been walking on eggshells for a long time. I hugged my kids and assured them that they are my top priority, above Amanda or anyone else. Several comments emphasized that even though my son is grown, he still needs his father. I made sure to let him know that I will always be there for him and his sister, even as they become independent adults. The entire conversation lasted about 2 hours, covering many important points and evoking emotions from all sides. In summary, Amanda and I have ended our relationship. I made it clear to my kids that none of this is their fault, and that Amanda, as an adult, is responsible for her words. At the moment, my kids and I are doing okay, but they aren't fully on board with me, and it may take some time. I'm completely fine with that, and just want my kids to feel comfortable in their own home. Amanda has a day off from work tomorrow, so I plan on talking to her then. I also intend to call my mother and ask why she thought it was appropriate to bring up Kayla at dinner. I want my daughter to be away when I address these issues, so she'll be staying with Sam tonight and tomorrow night. That's where things stand for me right now. I'm not thrilled with the outcome of my relationship with Amanda, but I prioritize my kids' happiness and well-being over having a wife. So, where we last left off is that my kids and I had a conversation and resolved our issues. My daughter decided to stay with her brother to avoid getting involved in what was about to happen with my now ex-fiancé. Before the difficult part of the day, which was breaking up with Amanda, I called my mom to inform her about the situation. Many of the comments advised me not to blame my mom for the comment she made. Now, reflecting on the situation with a clear mind, I realized that my mother's comment about Amanda was actually a compliment towards her. This was confirmed during our conversation. My mother felt extremely guilty for the entire situation. She believed that everything that happened was a result of her one comment. I reassured her that none of this was her fault, and that I never blamed her for any of it. We talked for a bit before ending the call around 9:15 a.m. I then waited for Amanda to wake up. She woke up at around 10:30 a.m., and I decided not to approach her immediately. I wanted to give her some time, so I waited until about 11:10 a.m. to sit her down and talk. Many suggested secretly recording the conversation. I thought that was a smart idea, so I kept my phone recording in my back pocket the entire time. I didn't think Amanda would do anything drastic, but I wanted to be cautious. The conversation with her went as expected, which is to say, not well at all. I told her we needed to have a serious talk, and we sat in the living room. I then confronted her about the comment she made about Kayla at my parents' house, how it affected my children and me, her lack of apology or acknowledgement for what she said, and so on. I made it clear that I expected her to apologize to my parents, my in-laws, and most importantly, my kids. Throughout my explanation, she showed little emotion except for slightly wider eyes. After I expressed my feelings, she asked directly, "So, if I apologize to everyone, will everything go back to normal?" I told her straightforwardly, no. I explained that the comment she made at dinner was not the only issue I had with her. I also mentioned that I was aware of her pressuring Sam to move out when he wasn't even sure if he wanted to, and that she was now doing the same with Liz. I did my best to keep my kids out of the discussion, but I told Amanda that the way she treated my children, as described by them, was the main reason why I no longer saw a future with her. Amanda remained stoic until I informed her that our relationship was over. That's when she seemed to panic. She kept apologizing and promising to make things right with my kids. I told her that while I would appreciate an apology, it wouldn't change the fact that we were finished. At this point, she began to cry and asked me why I wasn't willing to try and fix our relationship. I explained that despite still loving her deeply, I couldn't risk my children getting hurt again. Frustrated, I asked her why she was trying to push my kids out of their own home. Her response shocked me, although some commenters seemed to have already figured out what Amanda was truly like. She said, "Well, I didn't know you expected me to house somebody else's kids for the rest of my life." I was furious and immediately told her to leave. I made it clear that my kids could go wherever they pleased, especially in a house that I owned and paid for. She tried to argue back, but in the end she packed a few bags and went to stay with one of her friends. To protect myself, I emailed a copy of the phone recording to myself. The conversation lasted only about 25 minutes, shorter than the talk I had with my kids. If any issues arise from the conversation, I have evidence to protect my reputation. I texted my kids, letting them know that Amanda was permanently out of the house and they were welcome to return at any time. I also informed my son that he could move back in completely if he wanted to. My daughter is returning from her brother's place in the afternoon, and I still need to make phone calls to apologize to my parents and in-laws for this messy situation. Amanda keeps blowing up my phone, wanting to work things out, but I have made it clear that she is not welcome to live here again. I will allow her to come by in the next few days to collect her remaining belongings. I'll be honest, I am devastated. Despite everything Amanda did, I still love her, and that feeling won't disappear easily. However, I will be okay. Right now, my focus is on my family, and I will use this situation as an opportunity to bond more with my kids. Your kids are more important than your fiancé, and it seems like you made the right decision. It's crucial to prioritize the well-being and happiness of your children, especially when it comes to their emotional and mental health. Take the time to strengthen your bond with them and create a supportive and loving environment. Family always comes first. A phobia consumes me, gripping my every move, my every thought, but little did I know that my deepest fear would take me to the edge, pushing me towards a terrifying confrontation with authority. In the face of wasps, panic turns into panic-inducing chaos, and my own father becomes the catalyst for an unimaginable ordeal. Here's how it all went down. For context, this story actually happened a couple of years ago. I have since moved out and am happily living with my partner. So, as the title obviously states, I have a phobia of wasps. Now this isn't just an ick or a small fear. This is a full-blown panic-inducing phobia, and I've had it for as long as I can remember. Anytime I see a wasp, no matter how far away from me it is, I will do absolutely anything I can to get as far away from it as possible. If one flies near me or is in my immediate vicinity, I will start to shake, cry, hyperventilate, and if it gets any closer, I will start screaming and flailing much like a child. It's incredibly embarrassing and humiliating, especially out in public. I've tried my best to control it, but nothing so far has helped. It might be worth mentioning I'm also autistic, so I struggle deeply with emotional regulation due to my disability. My wasp phobia has always been a huge nuisance, especially to the people around me. And trust me, my family made sure I knew about it. As a young child, I was constantly reminded of how I ruined family outings, how my family could never take me outside. I would be spanked for having my panic attacks, etc. On top of that, my dad and his brother loved to torment me about it when I was little. They would jab me in the head and make buzzing noises to startle me. They would tell me there were nests, wasps nearby to make me scream and amp, cry, and then when I got to the point of crying, they would make fun of me for being such a crybaby. So, needless to say, my wasp phobia isn't necessarily all about wasps. There's some PTSD attached to it as well. Enough with the sad backstory, though, and on to the main event. A couple of years ago, I was almost 21 at the time, my mom and I had just returned from the grocery store. We pulled into the driveway, and beside the driveway in front of my parents' house stands a big oak tree. Wasps do tend to hang around by that tree, of course, for the wood. At that point, I had gotten myself to ignore them, as long as they didn't bother me. This time, however, there were a whole bunch of them swooping and buzzing around the car. My mom had initially asked me to step out and assist her with the groceries. I hesitated, requesting her to begin unloading, promising I'd join her once I had managed to calm my nerves about the wasps. Instead of leaving, she chose to stay in the car with me, offering her support. I want to make it clear, my mom wasn't trapped with me. She was there by choice, trying to help, and she had every ability to leave if she wanted to. From the corner of my eye, I noticed my dad in the front yard, observing that I hadn't exited the car. He approached and reached for the door handle. My heart raced and I screamed, holding the door shut. The sight of wasps hovering near the door only intensified my fear. My mom, in a firm voice, told him to back off, assuring him she had the situation under control. "Just go away," she said. "I'm trying to calm her down, and you're only making things worse." But the rising tension, combined with my initial panic, was pushing me towards an autism meltdown. I felt trapped and like I couldn't escape. My dad came back after a few minutes and tried once again to open the door. I freaked out again and started crying, begging him to leave me alone. He obliges and goes away. A few moments later, I finally begin to calm down and go to get out of the car so I can make a beeline, pun absolutely intended, for the garage. Keep in mind, there's still very much a large sum of wasps zipping back and forth around the car. Right as I'm about to open the door, my dad emerges with his phone up to his ear. He approached the door and banged on the window, startling me so much that I didn't want to open it again. When he forced the door open, he told me, his voice filled with authority, "I'm calling the police to get you out of this car." His words sent a wave of terror through me, prompting me to immediately exit the car. Tears streamed down my face as I pleaded, "Please don't call them." I quickly got out and dashed into the house, forgetting all about the wasps. The weight of embarrassment and humiliation pressed down on me, making me feel small and childlike. Inside, my mother's furious voice echoed as she confronted him. Overwhelmed, I locked myself in the bathroom, a nauseating feeling rising within me. Tears flowed freely as I let myself break down for a few moments, trying to process everything that had just transpired. After a while, I attempted to regain my composure. A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. It was my dad. His voice, cold and accusatory, came through. "You know, it's your fault I had to threaten to call the police. You would have deserved it if I had. And if I had called them, You'd be the one explaining how you were too scared of a few wasps to get out of the car. I remained silent, not trusting myself to speak. In fact, I didn't respond to him at all for 2 days. After a couple of days of the silent treatment, he told me that if I wanted to treat him so badly for being a loving and caring father, then I wasn't allowed to have privileges in the house anymore, and he was taking my car away, essentially trying to lock me down like a child. Given the fact that this was a tactic he'd been using my whole life, I gave in to him, and things went back to normal, if you can even call it that. As I said before, I have since moved out and I'm far away from that situation. I still can't believe anybody in their right mind would call the police on an autistic person who was having a moment of distress, especially considering I wasn't hurting myself or anybody else. My mom wasn't trapped in there with me either like my dad tried to claim. She had free will to leave the car at any time. Very glad to now be living with my girlfriend, who is very patient and kind with me about my phobia. It's a work in progress, and the police incident set me back drastically, but I'm slowly getting better. Long story short, my dad was so desperate for a power trip that he came down on me with an iron fist about a situation that he wasn't involved in or asked to become involved in. It's important to surround yourself with supportive and understanding individuals who uplift you. I'm glad you're now in a better living situation with someone who is patient and kind to you. Keep focusing on your progress, and remember that you deserve happiness and support. As I stared at my bruised reflection, a chilling encounter with my neighbor replayed in my mind. His smirk, his disrespectful words. But when my boyfriend took matters into his own hands, everything spiraled out of control. The police, the suspicion, the escalating tension. Here's how it all went down. My boyfriend, 28, and I, 24, recently went on a trip. While my boyfriend is an experienced surfer, I only have some surfing skills as I've been doing it for a few years, but don't get the opportunity to practice much. That day, the waves had been particularly unforgiving, and I had taken a nasty hit from my surfboard. The result? A bruised under eye and a few cuts that seemed to scream, "Rookie!" Although it wasn't too severe, when we returned home, my neighbor, 42, noticed and asked about it while I was checking my mail. "What happened to your face?" he asked. I turned, forcing a smile. "Took a hit from my surfboard," I replied, hoping that would be the end of it. But he smirked. "Sure it wasn't your boyfriend? You seem so smitten with him. I bet you wouldn't even mind." I felt my cheeks burn. "That's a disrespectful thing to say," I shot back, my voice firm. "It was an accident while surfing." He chuckled, clearly enjoying my discomfort. "Just making a joke." "It's not funny," I said, keeping my voice steady. "And it's not appropriate." He continued to laugh, and I could feel my anger rising. Without another word, I turned and walked away. Later, as I recounted the incident to my boyfriend, I could see the anger flash in his eyes. "He said what?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded. I handled it, told him it was disrespectful. But my boyfriend wasn't having it. He went over to our neighbor's house, and I watched from the window as they spoke. I couldn't hear the words, but the body language was clear. My boyfriend was protective, firm, and the neighbor looked taken aback. The following day, the police conducted a wellness check on me due to an anonymous report, which I suspect was made by the neighbor. Their intention was to ensure that there was no domestic abuse taking place. They interviewed both me and my boyfriend, and I had to present them with GoPro footage in an attempt to prove that we had gone surfing. Just to give you a background, this neighbor has been super flirtatious with me in the past, and every time my boyfriend is away for work, he seems to take note of this and starts trying to run into me more, catching me on my runs, etc. He has said inappropriate things to me that a married man really shouldn't be saying. I have some proof of his inappropriate behavior because he tried to add me on Instagram and sent me some inappropriate texts while he was supposedly drunk. Would I be the jerk if I show his wife those? I guess it's petty because I'm retaliating, but I just hate the guy now. And maybe he will truly stay away after that. I don't want to start a back-and-forth war, though. I'd feel unsafe during the times my boyfriend is away for work. We've been living next to each other for almost a year, and his behavior has been slowly escalating during this time. My partner has confronted him before, a few weeks prior to this incident, when he sent drunk direct messages. So when my partner saw us talking, he confronted my neighbor again to firmly remind him to keep his distance from me. It was more about keeping him in check. I strongly believe that my neighbor called the police out of spite, not because he suspected domestic violence. Most likely, it's his spite against my partner. My neighbor has commented multiple times that I am too obsessed with my boyfriend, largely because he is aware that we have a strong relationship, which he has somewhat stalked both online and offline. According to him, I talk about my boyfriend too much during our conversations, which he has expressed his dislike for. I deliberately do this to spoil his attempts to steer our conversations towards inappropriate topics. Also, my neighbor has never had my phone number or contact information. We don't communicate. He searched for me online and admitted to doing so because I had mentioned when I moved here that I recently graduated from art school, do some painting on the side, and sometimes sell a piece here and there. He claims he tried to look for a website to see my art but found my LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram instead. My name is published online in a few places because of my work, a recognition award I received while in university, and photos from my Instagram have been published too, so they are credited with my username. All this to say, he put in his own work and found me. I did not give him my socials. Some people are saying we are texting and communicating with each other. You have misunderstood. He messaged me on Instagram one time. I never responded to those messages. It was just him sending in text after text throughout the night, then apologizing and saying he had been drunk. I have since blocked him. After careful consideration, I have decided that I will not retaliate in any way. What I truly want is for him to leave me alone, and I understand that I cannot achieve that by causing trouble in their marriage, which I'm sure is already experiencing difficulties without my involvement. I would have maybe been more inclined to be more transparent with his wife if I didn't live next door, had some anonymity, and he didn't have access to me, which it feels like he does. If I had answers to a lot of what-ifs, but I don't. And I think it will make my life a nightmare, especially when my boyfriend is away, and I'm living alone for weeks at a time. To be honest, now that I've calmed down and have a clearer mind after talking to my partner, I realize that it's not a good idea to involve myself further by approaching his wife to make a point. I don't believe it will achieve what I want, which is for the man to never speak to me again. Additionally, I'm unsure of how the wife will react. Based on our limited interactions, she has been distant and difficult to engage with. For those who say it's fair for him to have called it in, I personally didn't feel at any moment that my neighbor showed me the concern someone would have if they suspected domestic violence. He should have given me a heads up, tried to ask me when my boyfriend might be out of the house, etc. You know, like a genuinely concerned individual who would spring surprise police on a domestic violence victim who lives with their abuser. From his comments to his reaction, he was nothing but crass, rude, and patronizing during our interaction about my bruise. He was simply getting some kind of satisfaction in trying to start a childish spat with me. I genuinely feel he enjoys trying to get a rise out of me since his flirting no longer gets him the reaction he craves because he knows our pleasantries have soured. There wasn't any concern, he was smirking. He told me, "Only you make it look fashionable," and as I said previously, his behavior leading up to this incident cannot be separated from the scenario. Right now, I will explore the possibility of obtaining a restraining order if the behavior continues, such as him approaching or talking to me. We have informed the police that the report was a mistake or false. Due to the laws in our state, they are obligated to make arrests in cases of domestic violence, making it a serious situation. Personally, it has been very traumatizing for me. If we decide to file a formal complaint against the report, we will need to contact the police again. We had already installed cameras some time ago when the unsettling behavior began. Additionally, I strategically park my Tesla to ensure it is close enough to record any interactions and to allow me to remotely check the cameras using the app before leaving. To improve privacy and security, we intend to install a fence around the yard. We have also acquired a trespassing alarm. Furthermore, we are contemplating the idea of getting a large dog, such as a Malinois, a breed that my partner's colleague has experience with from their military service. Since we are already renovating the windows, we are considering adding window alarms as well. Initially, I had concerns about it being excessive, but considering the current situation, it appears necessary. Remember, if you ever feel threatened or unsafe, it's important to involve the authorities. Unfortunately, we can't choose our neighbors, but we can take steps to protect ourselves and ensure our safety. If you enjoyed today's stories, check out the other videos on your screen now. Submit your own stories at you'rethejerk.com. Subscribe now or you're definitely the jerk.